Art isn't a real job. You're 28 years old and still asking us for money. Pathetic. Her father said it across the dinner table, his voice loud enough that Sophia's mother and brother both looked down at their plates, embarrassed but not disagreeing. Sophia sat there, her portfolio tucked under her chair, the one she'd brought to show them her latest work. The one they wouldn't even look at. She set down her fork, she smiled, and she made a decision that would change everything. "You're right," she said calmly. "I should stop asking you for anything." They thought she meant she'd finally get a real job. What she actually meant was something entirely different. Sophia Chen was 28 years old, a digital artist living in a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, and the family failure. Not because she lacked talent or ambition. She had both in abundance. She had graduated with honors from the Rhode Island School of Design, had worked as a freelance illustrator for 3 years, and had built a modest but growing following on social media for her digital art. But none of that mattered to her family. Because her older brother Michael was a tech entrepreneur, and in the Chen family, tech entrepreneur trumped artist. Success measured in venture capital funding trumped success measured in creative fulfillment. Michael trumped Sophia. Always had, always would. At least that's what they all believed. The dinner that would define everything happened on a cold February evening at her parents' house in Westchester. The house where Sophia had grown up, where every wall displayed Michael's achievements, his college diploma, framed articles about his startup, photos from tech conferences. There wasn't a single piece of Sophia's art anywhere. Sophia had taken the train from the city, lugging her portfolio and a small overnight bag. She'd been working on a new series of digital paintings, abstract pieces that incorporated elements of her Chinese heritage with futuristic aesthetics. It was her best work yet, and she'd thought naively that maybe this time her family would understand. The dining room was exactly as she remembered, formal, expensive, cold. Her mother, Linda, had prepared an elaborate meal, though Sophia knew her mother considered cooking beneath her now that they had money. Her father, David, sat at the head of the table in his usual position of authority. Michael sat to his right, still in his work clothes, having come straight from his office in Manhattan. So David said after they'd started eating, "How's the job search going?" Sophia had been expecting this. "I'm not looking for a job, Dad. I have work. I'm a working artist." "Working," David repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. "And how much did you make last month?" "About $2,000. Michael snorted. "2,000. Sophia, my junior developers make that in a week." "Good for them," Sophia said evenly. "It's not sustainable," Linda added, her voice softer but no less dismissive. "You're 28, you should be thinking about your future. About stability." "I am thinking about my future. Art is my future." David set down his knife and fork with deliberate precision. "No, Sophia. Art is a hobby. Art is what you do after you have a real career, when you can afford to indulge. It's not something you build a life on." Tell that to every successful artist in history. How many successful artists do you actually know? David challenged. How many of your art school friends are making a living? Real money, not scraping by in cheap apartments. Sophia thought about this. It was true that most of her Rust classmates had taken corporate jobs, graphic designers at advertising agencies, UI designers at tech companies, art directors at magazines, steady paychecks, benefits, 401ks, the practical path. But some hadn't. Some were still creating, still fighting, still believing their art mattered more than financial security. "I know several," Sophia said. "And I'm building my own success." "On whose dime?" Michael asked. "You've borrowed money from Mom and Dad at least 5 times in the past year." "Borrowed," Sophia emphasized. "Which I'm paying back." "With what?" "Your $2,000 a month. That probably doesn't even cover your rent." It didn't. Her rent was $2,200, and Sophia had been supplementing her freelance income with occasional waitressing shifts and money from her parents. She'd told herself it was temporary, that her art career was on the verge of taking off, that she just needed a little more time. But sitting there watching her family look at her with a mixture of pity and disappointment, she realized they would never believe in her. Never see her as anything other than the daughter who'd made bad choices and refused to grow up. "I came here tonight," Sophia said, pulling her portfolio from under her chair, "to show you what I've been working on, to share something I'm proud of." David glanced at the portfolio, like it was contaminated. "Sophia, we've seen your art. It's very pretty, but pretty doesn't pay bills. You haven't looked at anything I've created in 3 years, because it's always the same thing," Linda said. "Abstract digital paintings that don't mean anything. At least if you were doing portraits or landscapes, something people actually want to buy." "People do want to buy my work. $2,000 a month worth of people," Michael interjected. "That's poverty level, Sophia. That's embarrassing." Sophia felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, just crack. A fissure that would eventually split wide open. "I actually came here tonight to ask for help," she said quietly. "I have an opportunity to create a collection for a gallery show in Chelsea, but I need to invest in better equipment, pay for studio space, cover materials. I need about $5,000. The silence was heavy and absolute. Then David laughed. Not a cruel laugh exactly, but a laugh of disbelief. "You want us to give you $5,000 for art supplies? Invest. Not give. I'd pay you back. Like you've paid back the other times. I'm making payments. $50 a month," Michael said. "At that rate you'll have us paid back by the time you're 40. "Michael has a point," Linda said gently. "Sophia, we love you, but we can't keep enabling this. You need to face reality." "Reality," Sophia repeated. "Yes, reality. Art isn't a real job. You're 28 years old and still asking us for money. It's pathetic." There it was. The word her father had been building toward, pathetic. Sophia looked at each of them. Her father, who had never once attended any of her art shows, not even her senior thesis exhibition at Art ISD. Her mother, who introduced her to friends as our daughter, the one still figuring things out. Her brother, who had borrowed $50,000 from their parents for his first startup, and never paid back a cent, because it had succeeded. So technically he didn't owe them anything. "You're right," Sophia said, closing her portfolio. "I should stop asking you for anything." David looked relieved. "I'm glad you're finally being realistic. Michael's company is hiring. I'm sure he could get you an interview for an entry-level position." "Thanks," Sophia said. "But I don't need Michael's help." She stood up, gathered her things and walked toward the door. "Sophia," Linda called. "Where are you going? Dinner isn't over." "I'm done," Sophia said simply. She took the train back to Brooklyn, her portfolio heavy in her lap, her chest tight with something that felt like grief but sharper, cleaner. By the time she reached her apartment, the grief had transformed into something else entirely, clarity. She opened her laptop and started researching. Not job listings, not corporate positions, not the realistic path her family wanted her to take. She researched NFTs. To understand why Sophia was researching NFTs at midnight on a Tuesday, you had to understand what had been happening in the digital art world over the past year. A revolution was underway, one that her family knew nothing about because they'd never bothered to learn what she actually did. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, were digital assets verified using blockchain technology. In practical terms, they allowed digital artists to sell their work as unique collectible pieces. Artists who had spent years giving away their work for exposure were suddenly selling pieces for thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. Sophia had been watching this space for months, following artists who'd made life-changing money from NFT collections. She'd been hesitant to jump in, worried it was a bubble, worried her work wasn't good enough, worried about the technical barriers. But sitting in her tiny apartment at 1 a.m, still stinging from her father's words, she realized she had nothing to lose. If she failed, she'd be exactly where she was now. Broke, dismissed, pathetic. But if she succeeded, even modestly, she'd prove them all wrong. She opened her portfolio and looked at the series she'd been working on. 12 digital paintings, each one exploring themes of identity, heritage, and transformation. They were her best work, bold and distinctive. The kind of art that made people stop scrolling. She spent the next 3 days learning everything she could about NFTs. How to mint them, which platforms to use, how to market them, how to build a collection strategy. She joined Discord servers, followed NFT artists on Twitter, absorbed information like her life depended on it. Because maybe it did. The following Monday, Sophia made a decision. She had $3,000 in her savings account, money she'd been hoarding for emergencies. She withdrew 1,500 of it and invested in creating her NFT collection properly. She bought a better graphics tablet, upgraded her software, paid for consultation with an NFT artist who'd had success in the space. She stopped taking freelance illustration work, stopped waitressing, committed fully to creating the best collection she possibly could. Her landlord called about late rent. She told him she'd have it by the end of the month. She ate ramen and rice. She worked 16-hour days, perfecting each piece, writing descriptions, planning the release strategy. She titled the collection Metamorphosis. 12 pieces showing the transformation from constraint to freedom, from doubt to power, from invisible to undeniable. 3 weeks later, on a Friday evening in March, Sophia launched her collection on OpenSea, one of the largest NFT marketplaces. She'd built anticipation on Twitter, shared preview images, connected with other artists and collectors. Her following had grown from 800 to 3,000. She priced each piece at 0.15 Ethereum, about $600 at current exchange rates. Not cheap, but not prohibitively expensive for serious collectors. She'd set aside 2 pieces to gift to influential collectors, hoping they'd help promote the work. The collection went live at 8 p.m. By 8:07 p.m., 4 pieces had sold. By 8:15 p.m., 8 pieces had sold. By 8:30 p.m., the entire collection was sold out. Sophia sat at her desk, staring at her screen, unable to process what had just happened. 12 pieces. $7,200. In 30 minutes. More than 3 months of freelance income. In 30 minutes. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Twitter mentions, Discord messages, emails from collectors asking if she had more work available, from galleries asking if she'd consider showing physical prints, from other artists congratulating her. She had done it. She had actually done it. Absurd. But this was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. The collectors who'd bought her work started sharing it on social media. One piece was featured by a popular NFT curator with 500,000 followers. Another was purchased by a celebrity investor who posted about it on Instagram. The attention drove traffic to Sophia's profile. Her follower count exploded. 15,000, 20,000, 30,000. Galleries reached out. Brands wanted collaborations. Other artists wanted to connect. And then 6 weeks after her first collection sold out, Sophia received a DM that would change everything. It was from a collector named Alexandros, a prominent figure in the NFT space, known for investing early in artists who later became massive successes. I love your work. I want to commission a one-of-one piece. My budget is 15 Ethereum. Sophia did the math. 15 Ethereum was approximately $60,000. For one piece, she sat very still, reading the message over and over, making sure she wasn't misunderstanding. $60,000 for a single digital artwork. More than she'd made in the past 2 years combined. She messaged back, trying to sound professional despite her shaking hands. I'd be honored. What are you looking for? The conversation that followed was surreal. Alexandros wanted something personal, something that captured the feeling of transformation and rebirth. He gave her creative freedom, trusting her vision. They agreed on a timeline, 45 days, and he sent half the payment up front. $30,000 landed in Sophia's cryptocurrency wallet. She stared at the number, unable to breathe. This was real. This was actually happening. She paid her rent for 3 months in advance, bought proper equipment, invested in her craft, and she got to work on the most important piece she'd ever create. Meanwhile, her family had no idea any of this was happening. She hadn't spoken to them since the dinner. Her mother had called twice, left voicemails asking if she was okay, saying they were worried. Michael had sent a text, brief and impersonal, checking in. Sophia hadn't responded. She was busy building the life they'd told her was impossible. The commission piece took her 6 weeks instead of 45 days. She titled it Phoenix Rising, a massive digital canvas that incorporated elements of traditional Chinese art with futuristic digital aesthetics. It was ambitious, complex, beautiful. Her best work yet. She delivered it to Alexandros, who was thrilled. He paid the remaining $30,000 immediately, and posted about the piece on his social media, where it was seen by hundreds of thousands of people. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Sophia's DMs flooded with commission requests, collaboration offers, interview requests. She was approached by a gallery in Los Angeles about a solo show. A luxury fashion brand wanted to license her art for a limited edition collection. 4 months after her father had called her pathetic, Sophia Chen had made over $200,000 from her art. And she still hadn't told her family a single thing. The silence was strategic. Sophia had learned something important during those first few months of success. The satisfaction didn't come from proving her family wrong. It came from building something so undeniable that their opinions became irrelevant. She moved out of her tiny Brooklyn studio and into a beautiful loft in Williamsburg. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dedicated studio space, room to actually breathe and create. The rent was $4,000 a month, double what she'd been paying, but now she could afford it easily. She bought proper equipment. A high-end computer, professional monitors, the best graphics tablet money could buy. She invested in her business, hired a manager to handle the administrative work, brought on an assistant to help with social media and community management. Her NFT collections continued to sell out within hours. She'd released 3 more series, each more successful than the last. Collectors fought over her work. Gallery owners courted her. Brands competed for collaborations. By summer, 6 months after that dinner with her family, Sophia had made over $500,000. And still she said nothing. Her mother called regularly now, leaving increasingly concerned voicemails. "Sophia, sweetie, please call me back. We're worried about you. Are you eating? Do you need money? Michael said he saw something about you online, but the link didn't work. Please just let us know you're okay." Sophia would listen to the voicemails and delete them. She wasn't being cruel, she just wasn't ready. The space had been good for her. Without her family's constant judgment and disappointment, she'd flourished. She'd become the artist she was always meant to be. In July, Sophia received an invitation that made her realize she couldn't hide forever. She'd been selected for Forbes' 30 Under 30 list in the art and style category. They wanted to do a feature profile, including photos and an interview about her success in the NFT space. It would be public, searchable, impossible for her family to miss. Sophia thought about declining, but that felt cowardly. She'd built something remarkable, and she deserved to be recognized for it. If her family found out through a Forbes article, instead of a personal conversation, that was their problem, not hers. The interview happened in August. The journalist, a woman named Rebecca, asked thoughtful questions about Sophia's work, her process, and her rapid rise in the NFT world. "Your success has been extraordinary," Rebecca said. "What do you think separates artists who make it in this space from those who don't?" Sophia thought carefully about her answer. "Belief, I think. You have to believe your work has value even when no one else does. You have to be willing to bet on yourself when everyone tells you you're making a mistake." "Did you have people telling you that?" "Constantly. Including my family." "How did that feel?" "Lonely, difficult. But also clarifying. When you're the only person who believes in your vision, you develop a kind of resilience. You stop needing external validation because you've learned to validate yourself." Are you close with your family now? Sophia paused. We're working on it. The article published in September, timed with the official Forbes 30 Under 30 announcement. It included photos of Sophia in her studio, looking confident and successful, surrounded by her work. It detailed her earnings, her collections, her upcoming gallery show in Los Angeles. The response was overwhelming. Congratulations poured in from the art community, from collectors, from people who'd followed her journey. Her social media exploded. News outlets picked up the story. Digital artist goes from broke to Forbes 30 Under 30 in 8 months. And then, exactly 37 minutes after the article went live, her phone rang. It was Michael. Sophia stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered, Sophia, oh my God. Sophia, I just saw the Forbes article. Is this real?
No.
Did you really make over $1 million? The article said 500,000. Sophia corrected. Right, but it also said you have a gallery show coming up and brand deals. Sophia, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked what I was actually doing. You just assumed I was failing. There was a pause. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked about my art? Not as a joke, not as a way to criticize, but genuinely asked. Michael didn't have an answer. Mom is freaking out, he said finally. Dad too. They feel terrible. They should. Sophia, come on. They're our parents. They were just worried about you. No, Michael. They were embarrassed by me. There's a difference. Can you at least come to dinner? Let them apologize. I'll think about it. She hung up. Over the next few days, the calls and messages intensified. Her mother left tearful voicemails. Her father sent a stiff email congratulating her on her success. Even extended family reached out, cousins and aunts and uncles who'd barely acknowledged her existence before. Everyone wanted to reconnect now that she was successful. Now that she'd proven them wrong. Now that her art career wasn't pathetic but impressive. Sophia found it exhausting. A week after the Forbes article, her manager, a sharp woman named Alexis, called with news. I got an offer I think you'll want to hear. Christie's wants to include one of your pieces in their upcoming contemporary art auction. Christie's, one of the world's most prestigious auction houses. The kind of venue that legitimized artists, that turned emerging talent into established names. Which piece? Sophia asked. They want Phoenix Rising. The commission piece you did for Alexandros. He's agreed to put it up for auction if you're comfortable with it. Phoenix Rising. The piece that had launched her into the stratosphere. The piece that represented her transformation from struggling artist to undeniable success. What's the estimate? 200,000 to 300,000. Sophia sat down. Dollars? Dollars. That's insane. That's the market. Your work is hot, Sophia. People want it. Christie's thinks it could go even higher depending on bidding. Sophia agreed to the auction. It was scheduled for October, just over 8 months after her family had called her pathetic. She decided to attend in person, to stand in that auction house and watch her art sell for more money than her parents made in several years. Not because she wanted to gloat, but because she wanted to witness it for herself. To make it real. The night before the auction, Sophia finally agreed to have dinner with her family. The dinner was at the same house in Westchester. But everything felt different now. Sophia arrived in an Uber, wearing designer clothes she'd bought without worrying about the price. She carried herself differently, taller, more confident, comfortable in her own skin. Linda answered the door, her eyes immediately filling with tears. Sophia, oh sweetheart, you look amazing. Thanks, Mom. Come in, come in. Your father and Michael are in the living room. The house looked the same, but Sophia noticed something new. On the wall in the entryway, previously blank, now hung a framed print of one of her NFT pieces. She paused, staring at it. We bought it, Linda said quickly. From your second collection, we wanted you to know we support your work. Sophia said nothing. They'd bought a print after she became successful, after Forbes validated her, after it was safe to publicly support her. In the living room, David and Michael stood awkwardly. David looked older than Sophia remembered. His confidence somehow diminished. Michael looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure how to act around his sister anymore. Sophia, David said. Thank you for coming. You asked me to. We did because we owe you an apology. A real one. They sat down, the tension thick enough to cut. Linda brought out appetizers, fussing nervously. David cleared his throat several times, clearly struggling with what to say. Finally, Sophia spoke. The Forbes article said I made $500,000. That's not quite accurate. Everyone looked at her. It's closer to $1 million too. The silence was absolute. Jesus Christ, Michael muttered. And tomorrow, Sophia continued. One of my pieces is being auctioned at Christie's. The estimate is $200,000 to $300,000. My manager thinks it might go higher. David looked like he'd been punched. How did this happen? I worked. I created. I believed in myself when no one else did. We wanted to believe in you, Linda said. We just didn't understand. You didn't try to understand. You dismissed my work without ever looking at it. You called me pathetic for pursuing the only thing I've ever been passionate about. I shouldn't have said that, David said quietly. That was wrong. Yes, it was. But you have to understand, Sophia. We were worried. Most artists don't make it. The statistics are terrible. We didn't want you to struggle your whole life. So instead you made sure I struggled with your judgment and disappointment. That's not what we meant to do. But it's what you did. Michael leaned forward. Sophia, for what it's worth, I was wrong too. I looked down on your work because it wasn't what I understood. Tech, business, that's my world. I couldn't see that art could be just as valuable, just as legitimate as a career. And now you can, because I'm making money. No, because I actually looked at your work. I spent hours going through your NFT collections, reading what people said about them, understanding why they matter. Your art is incredible, Sophia. It always was. I just wasn't paying attention. This, more than anything else, made Sophia's anger soften slightly. At least Michael had done the work to understand, even if it took her success to motivate him. I want to be in your life, Linda said. I want to support your career, to see your shows, to be the mother I should have been from the beginning. Why now? Sophia asked. Because it's finally respectable. Because you can brag to your friends about your daughter, the successful artist. Because we miss you, David said. Because the house feels empty without you. Because we realize we failed you as parents, and we want a chance to do better. Sophia looked at each of them. Her family, flawed and human, and finally willing to see her. I'm going to the auction tomorrow, she said. You can come if you want. See what I've built. We'd love to, Linda said immediately. But understand something. Our relationship doesn't go back to how it was. I'm not the daughter who needed your approval anymore. I've built my own life, my own success, my own identity. If you want to be part of it, you have to respect that. We do, David said. We will. The rest of dinner was awkward but not hostile. They asked careful questions about her work, her process, her plans. Sophia answered honestly but guardedly. Trust, she'd learned, was something that had to be rebuilt slowly. When she left that evening, Michael walked her out to the car. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Do you hate us? Sophia thought about this carefully. No, I don't hate you, but I don't need you anymore either, and that's probably healthier for everyone. She got in the Uber and drove back to her loft in Brooklyn, feeling neither victorious nor sad, just calm. The next day, her entire family showed up to Christie's for the auction. The Christie's auction house in Rockefeller Center was everything Sophia had imagined. Elegant, prestigious, filled with wealthy collectors and art world insiders. The kind of place that had seemed impossibly distant when she was eating ramen in her studio apartment 8 months ago. Now she was here as an artist whose work was being sold. Her family arrived together, looking out of place and overwhelmed. Sophia met them in the lobby, dressed in a sleek black dress that had cost more than her first month's rent in Brooklyn. This is incredible, Linda whispered, looking around at the gilt-edged walls and crystal chandeliers. "Come on," Sophia said. "The contemporary art session starts in 20 minutes. They found seats in the middle of the auction room. Sophia's piece, Phoenix Rising, wouldn't come up until about 45 minutes into the session. She'd seen it earlier, displayed in the preview gallery, looking magnificent under professional lighting. The auction began. Sophia watched as painting after painting, sculpture after sculpture sold for amounts that made her dizzy. 300,000, 500,000, 800,000. The art world operated on a completely different scale than she'd ever imagined. Her manager Alexis sat next to her. "Nervous? Terrified? Don't be. The bidding is already strong. We have 3 phone bidders lined up and at least 2 serious collectors in the room." Finally, 43 minutes into the session, the auctioneer announced, "Lot 47, Phoenix Rising by Sophia Chen. Digital artwork, NFT with physical print, minted 2023. We'll start bidding at 200,000. A paddle went up immediately. 200,000. Thank you. Do I hear 220? Another paddle. Then another. Sophia watched, her heart pounding, as the price climbed. 240, 260, 280. Her mother grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. 300,000. The high estimate. The bidding didn't stop. 320, 340. The room was electric now, people turning to see who was bidding, whispers spreading. 360,000. The auctioneer called. "Do I hear 380? A phone bidder, someone on the line with a Christie's specialist, raised the bid. 380,000. "Do I hear 400? The paddle went up again. 400,000. Sophia couldn't breathe. $400,000. For a single piece of art she'd created in her studio. "Do I hear 420? Silence. The auctioneer waited, his gavel raised. "Fair warning. Selling at 400,000. More silence. "Sold for $400,000 to the bidder on the phone." The gavel came down. The room applauded, as was customary for exceptional sales. Sophia sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. "Congratulations," Alexis said, grinning. "Your commission on that is 60,000. Not bad for a day's work." Sophia's father made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a choke. $60,000. "For one piece," Michael added, his voice stunned. But Sophia was thinking about something else. Not the money, though that was extraordinary. She was thinking about the fact that her art, the thing her family had dismissed as a hobby, as a waste of time, as pathetic, had just sold at Christie's for $400,000. She had done it. She had actually done it. After the auction, several collectors approached Sophia, introducing themselves, asking about future work. A representative from the Museum of Modern Art asked if she'd be interested in discussing a potential acquisition. A gallery owner from Paris wanted to schedule a meeting about a possible show. Her family stood back, watching, finally understanding what she'd built. On the street outside Christie's, David pulled Sophia aside. "I owe you more than an apology," he said. "I owe you an acknowledgement. You were right, and I was wrong. About everything. I know. Can you forgive me?" Sophia thought about it. "Eventually, maybe. But Dad, you need to understand something. I didn't do any of this to prove you wrong. I didn't build this career because I wanted you to finally respect me. I did it because I love art, because I had to create, because it's who I am. Your opinion, whether good or bad, doesn't change that anymore." David nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "You've grown up. I had to." That evening, Sophia's phone exploded with messages. Congratulations from the art community, interview requests from major publications, offers from galleries and brands. Her Instagram followers jumped by 50,000 overnight. She was no longer an emerging artist. She was established, respected, undeniable. And she had done it entirely on her own terms. The months that followed the Christie's auction were a whirlwind. Sophia's career trajectory shifted from rising star to established artist seemingly overnight. The $400,000 sale had given her credibility in traditional art circles, bridging the gap between the NFT world and the conventional gallery system. Her Los Angeles show in November was a massive success. Every piece sold before the opening night even ended. Total sales exceeded $1.2 million. Art critics who'd been skeptical of NFT art wrote glowing reviews of her work. By December, less than a year after her father had called her pathetic, Sophia had earned over $3 million from her art. $3 million. She bought a house, not a condo or an apartment, but an actual house in the Catskills, 2 hours north of the city. A converted barn with soaring ceilings, massive windows, and enough space for a proper studio. A place that was entirely hers, paid for entirely with money she'd earned from her creativity. She also did something her family wouldn't have expected. She started a foundation. The Sophia Chen Foundation for Emerging Artists provided grants to young artists from low-income backgrounds. $5,000 each, no strings attached, to help them invest in equipment, materials, studio space. The things Sophia hadn't been able to afford until she'd made it on her own. "You're giving away money?" Michael had asked when she told him about the foundation. They'd been having coffee in Manhattan, slowly rebuilding their relationship. "I'm investing in artists who deserve a chance," Sophia corrected. "People who are being told their dreams are impractical, that art isn't a real career. I want to help them prove everyone wrong." "That's very generous. It's also strategic. The art world has too many barriers. Talent isn't enough if you can't afford the tools to develop it. I'm trying to change that." Michael stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about what you said. About how I dismissed your work because I didn't understand it. I did the same thing to a lot of people, actually. Anyone whose success didn't look like mine. And I'm trying to be better. I hired an artist to design our company's new branding. I'm paying her fairly, giving her creative freedom, actually listening to her ideas. It's making the company better." "Good," Sophia said. She appreciated the effort, even if it had taken her success to inspire it. Her relationship with her parents remained complicated. They tried. She gave them that. They attended her shows, shared her work on social media, told their friends about her accomplishments with genuine pride. But there was a distance now that hadn't existed before, a wariness on Sophia's part that might never fully heal. Linda called one evening in January, her voice hesitant. "Sophia, your father and I were talking. We want to pay you back for all the times we lent you money. With interest. You don't need to do that. We do. It feels wrong having borrowed from you when we were so judgmental about you borrowing from us." "Mom, I borrowed maybe $5,000 total over 2 years. You borrowed nothing. You just refused to invest in me when I needed it. Which is why we want to make it right now." Sophia thought about refusing on principle, but then she had a better idea. "Donate it to my foundation instead. Turn your guilt into something useful." Linda agreed immediately. February brought another milestone. Sophia was invited to speak at South by Southwest, the massive tech and culture festival in Austin. The panel was called "The Future of Digital Art," and she shared the stage with several prominent NFT artists and tech entrepreneurs. Backstage before the panel, she ran into someone unexpected. Trevor Park, a venture capitalist who'd attended RISD the same years she had. He'd been one of the students everyone expected to go corporate, and he had, spectacularly. His firm had invested in several major tech companies. "Sophia Chen," he said, recognizing her immediately. "I've been following your success. It's incredible." "Thanks, Trevor. I actually wanted to talk to you about something. My firm is interested in investing in the NFT art space. We think there's huge potential for growth. Would you be interested in consulting with us, helping us understand which artists and platforms are worth backing?" It was a generous offer, probably worth 6 figures for a few months of advisory work. A year ago, Sophia would have jumped at it. Now, she had the luxury of choice. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I'm trying to keep my focus on creating art, not evaluating it for financial potential." "I understand. But if you change your mind, the offer stands." During the panel, Sophia spoke about the democratization of art through NFTs, how blockchain technology had allowed artists to maintain control of their work while still earning sustainably. She talked about her journey from struggling artist to established success, though she left out the part about her family's dismissal. That story was hers, not public entertainment. The audience response was overwhelming. Standing ovation, hundreds of questions, countless people wanting to connect afterward. She was no longer just an artist. She was a voice, a leader, someone young artists looked to for inspiration. Flying back to New York, Sophia reflected on how much had changed in 14 months. From her father's cruel words at that dinner table, to this moment, sitting in first class, returning from a speaking engagement at one of the world's premier festivals. The transformation was complete, not just financially but internally. She wasn't the same person who'd left that dinner in tears, portfolio tucked under her arm, convinced she was a failure. She was Sophia Chen, successful digital artist, Forbes 30 under 30, foundation founder, woman who'd built an empire from pixels and persistence. And she'd done it by refusing to accept anyone else's definition of success. March brought an opportunity that felt like the ultimate validation. The Museum of Modern Art wanted to acquire one of Sophia's pieces for their permanent collection, not for display in a temporary exhibition, but for their permanent contemporary art holdings. Her work would hang in the same institution as Warhol, Pollock, and Kahlo. "This is extraordinary," Alexis said when she called with the news. "MoMA is incredibly selective about digital art. This puts you in rarefied company. Which piece do they want? They're giving you a choice. Either something from your Metamorphosis collection or a new commission. They're offering $250,000 for existing work or $350,000 for a commission." Sophia chose the commission. She wanted to create something specifically for MoMA, something that represented where she was now rather than where she'd been. She spent 2 months on the piece, working from her Catskills studio, pouring everything she'd learned and experienced into a massive digital canvas. She titled it Emergence, a stunning visual metaphor for transformation and self-actualization. The piece featured a figure breaking free from crystalline constraints, surrounded by flowing abstract elements that suggested both destruction and creation. It was bold, complex, unapologetically ambitious. Her masterwork. MoMA was thrilled. The acquisition was announced in May, accompanied by a press release and a small exhibition of Sophia's work in one of the museum's contemporary galleries. Her parents attended the opening. Sophia watched them move through the gallery, actually looking at her work this time, reading the descriptions, engaging with the art as art, rather than as evidence of poor life choices. "It's beautiful," Linda said quietly, standing in front of Emergence. "I don't fully understand it, but I can feel what you're expressing. The struggle, the breakthrough, the freedom. It's powerful." "Thanks, Mom. I'm sorry it took us so long to see it." "I know." They stood together in silence, mother and daughter, trying to find their way back to each other across the distance that had grown between them. That summer, Sophia turned 30. She celebrated with a small dinner party at her Catskills house, inviting her closest friends from the art world, Alexis, and tentatively, her family. Michael brought his girlfriend, a software engineer named Priya, who was genuinely interested in Sophia's work. David and Linda came early, helping set up, trying too hard but at least trying. During dinner, David stood and cleared his throat, clearly nervous. "I'd like to say something, if that's okay." Everyone quieted. 2 years ago, I told my daughter that art wasn't a real job. I told her she was wasting her time, wasting her life. I was wrong, completely, devastatingly wrong. Sophia, you've built something remarkable. Not just a successful career, but a body of work that matters, that moves people, that will outlast all of us. I'm proud of you. More than that, I'm in awe of you. He raised his glass. To Sophia, who had the courage to believe in herself when no one else would. Everyone drank. Sophia felt tears prickling her eyes but refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough over her family's rejection. She wouldn't cry over their belated acceptance. After dinner, Michael pulled her aside on the deck. "You know what I realized," he said. "You're actually more successful than I am. Michael, your company is valued at $50 million. Yeah, but it's not mine. I have investors, a board, partners. I answer to other people. You built something entirely your own. You answer to no one. That's real success. Different kinds of success, Sophia said. Both valid. Maybe. But if I could go back and do it over, I think I'd want what you have. The freedom. The creativity. The knowledge that everything you've built came from your own vision. It's not too late to make changes. Maybe not. They stood looking out at the mountains, the summer sun setting behind them, both of them thinking about paths taken and paths still possible. In August, Sophia received an email that made her laugh out loud. It was from her old college advisor at RIST, Professor Chen, no relation, who'd always believed in her work. Sophia, I hope this email finds you well and thriving, which I know you are because I've been following your extraordinary career. RIST would like to invite you to give the commencement speech at next year's graduation. We think you'd be an inspiration to our students, showing them what's possible when you commit fully to your artistic vision. Would you consider it? Would she consider it? Speaking at the graduation of the school where she'd studied, where she'd developed her skills, where she'd first started to believe she might actually make it as an artist, she replied within the hour, I would be honored. The RIST commencement took place on a warm May afternoon, almost exactly 3 years after Sophia's father had called her pathetic. She stood backstage in the auditorium, wearing the honorary doctorate robes the school had given her, listening to the provost introduce her. Sophia Chen graduated from RIST just 6 years ago. Since then, she has become one of the most successful and influential digital artists of her generation. Her work has sold at Christie's, been acquired by MoMA, and inspired countless young artists to pursue their creative dreams. She's also established a foundation that has provided over $1 million in grants to emerging artists. Please welcome Dr. Sophia Chen. The audience applauded as Sophia walked to the podium. She looked out at the graduates, young and hopeful and probably terrified about their futures. She'd been one of them once. Thank you for that incredibly generous introduction, she began. Though I have to say, hearing myself called Dr. Chen is still surreal. 6 years ago, I sat where you're sitting now, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake, wondering if I should have studied something practical, something that led to a clear career path, something my family would respect. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm going to tell you something most commencement speakers won't. The first few years after graduation were brutal. I was broke. I was dismissed by people I loved. I worked terrible jobs to pay rent while trying to build my art career. There were months when I ate ramen for dinner because I'd spent my last $100 on art supplies. There were times when I seriously considered giving up and getting a corporate job just to make my parents stop looking at me with disappointment. The audience was silent now, attentive. And then one night, after a particularly devastating dinner with my family, where my father told me art wasn't a real job, and I was wasting my life, I went home to my tiny apartment and made a decision. I decided I would rather fail at something I loved than succeed at something I didn't care about. I decided that my family's approval mattered less than my own integrity. She smiled. That decision changed everything. Not immediately, not magically, but slowly through months of work and risk and stubborn persistence, I built the career I have now. I won't stand here and tell you all you need is passion and hard work. Luck mattered. Timing mattered. The emergence of NFTs created an opportunity that didn't exist a decade ago. But what mattered most was my refusal to accept anyone else's definition of success. Sophia looked out at her family in the audience. Her parents, Michael and Priya, all watching her with expressions of pride and maybe a little bit of regret. Some of you are sitting here worried about disappointing your families, worried about choosing the wrong path, worried about failing. Let me tell you something important. You will disappoint people. You will make choices others don't understand. You will fail, probably multiple times. None of that matters as much as staying true to your creative vision. She gripped the podium. 3 years ago, I was making $2,000 a month and borrowing money from my parents for rent. Today, I have work in the permanent collection of MoMA. I've made enough money to never worry about rent again. I run a foundation that supports other artists, and most importantly, I wake up every single day excited about my work. That's success, not the money, though the money is nice, not the accolades, though those feel good too. The success is in the work itself, in the knowledge that I'm creating something meaningful on my own terms. The graduates were leaning forward now, hanging on her words. So my advice to you is this: trust yourself, trust your vision, and don't waste time trying to prove skeptics wrong. Instead, build something so remarkable that their opinions become irrelevant. Don't seek permission, don't wait for validation, just create. She paused, emotional now despite herself. Your art matters, your voice matters, you matter. Don't let anyone, not your family, not your friends, not society, convince you otherwise. The world needs artists who are brave enough to pursue their vision even when it's impractical, even when it's risky, even when everyone tells them they're making a mistake. Sophia looked out at the audience one final time. Congratulations, graduates. Go make something beautiful, and then make something else, and don't stop until you've built exactly the life you want to live. The applause started slowly, then built to a standing ovation. Sophia stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed by the response. After the ceremony, dozens of graduates approached her. They shared their fears, their dreams, their plans. She listened to each one, offering encouragement, sharing contacts, promising to follow their work. Her family waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. That was incredible, Linda said, hugging her. Everything you said was true. I know. I'm sorry it took us so long to understand, David added. But I'm grateful we finally do. Sophia looked at them, her flawed human family who'd hurt her and doubted her, and finally belatedly come around. I forgave you a long time ago, she said. Not because you asked for it, but because holding on to anger was keeping me stuck. I needed to move forward. Are we going to be okay? Linda asked. Our family? We already are. We're just different now. Better different. That evening, Sophia returned to her Catskills house. She stood in her studio, surrounded by her art, looking out at the mountains through the massive windows. 3 years since her father had called her pathetic. 3 years since she'd decided to bet everything on herself. She'd won that bet spectacularly. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another commission request, this one from a collector in Tokyo, offering $500,000 for a major piece. She smiled and set the phone down. She'd respond tomorrow. Tonight she just wanted to create. She opened a blank canvas on her computer and began to paint. Not for money, not for acclaim, not to prove anything to anyone. Just because she was an artist, and this was what artists did. They created, and Sophia Chen would never ever stop creating.